Welcome to today's repertoire testing video. We have black against an 1833. So into the Hyperaccelerated Dragon. And they do play this queen takes. Alright, so we block with knight f6, expect them to play e5 to chase the knight. We get to throw in knight c6. We'd like to hope they play queen c3, but okay, queen h4. We played this queen c3 line once. I don't remember. I think their queen did end up on the queen side, a square like h4. I don't know if they played it there right away. Is this not a version? I remember we spent a long time deciding whether we could take the pawn on e5. But I'm pretty sure we can do that in this case, because knight takes, queen a5 check, and I don't believe there's any disruption that protects that knight. Not queen a5 check first, because bishop d2 would attack the queen, but I don't think I see a reason not to grab a pawn. Yeah, triple checking, but I don't think the geometry works that way, so we should be okay. Okay, so good, we are a pawn. They have to block that, okay. So do I have a way to force things favorably? Could consider knight d5. If they castle, we get to capture something and mess with their pawns. If they capture, queen takes, they can't castle queenside. If rook d1, maybe even queen takes a2, but I think that's asking a little bit much. I think I would prefer to just castle. They're not threatening bishop d4 because the bishop is pinned, but afterwards I want to keep f6 protected. They can't play something like knight d5, attack e7. So yeah, I think we can go with this first for sure. And when they castle, probably we just do the same. Yeah, I wonder if there was a window for knight d5, but I don't really think it was worth it. So let's just castle. That's fine. Not worried about castling on opposite sides. We'll have to make sure we keep developing at a good pace. But I think d6, bishop, even e6 might be a good square if they don't play bishop c4. And if bishop d4, I was thinking queen a5, well, maybe queen h5. I want to try to chase their queen away from the king side. Just have to be careful the mini tactic. Bishop takes f6 removes the knight defending the queen, but I do still have the pawn. So it might go bishop takes, trade queens, and I sort of fracture the kingside pawns, although at least I would have traded some material. But I think I would prefer not to try to force that. Bishop d3 is kind of whatever. Could still play queen h5. Again, trying to push them around, because they should never accept a queen trade. I think we lead with d6. Just make sure we can develop the light square bishop. If they play rook e1, that's a great cue to finally move the queen. Be a good excuse to play queen h5. And then just watch the e7 pawn will be the weakest point. Queen or bishop f4. Yeah, I would think we go queen h5 for sure, because it kind of gains a tempo that they have to move their queen in response, so we're not just the only one who has to make these moves. So let's do that. Of course, we would take with the knight. Queen g3, I was considering queen g4 and trying to really push them around, and I think that actually might work really well. Because if they have to go to e3, then there's knight d5 with a fork on the queen and their bishop. So I don't know that they can avoid a queen trade. They could play queen g3, yeah, make me play queen g4. But after that, if they play rook e1, we can trade, and then we'll just have to safeguard this pawn, which I don't think should be that hard. We can even play rook e8. There's no bishop takes d6, because our knight would protect that rook on the e-file. I don't think I really want to throw in something like e5, then the d-pawn just gets super weak. So do I have better than guaranteeing this trade? I would be surprised if I did, so let's do it. Again, if they don't take, it would have to be queen e3. It's the only square to avoid a queen trade, but then knight d5. Attacks their queen, and this bishop on f4 would be exposed. So I don't think they should capture me, because I will get to activate a piece. I think they should try to play a productive move and encourage me to take. So again, that's why I was thinking rook h to e1. Maybe I could try to force it with knight h5 there, queen takes, bishop takes. I'm attacking their bishop and their rook. So they don't have time to take on e7. That might be productive. If not, I am okay with just trading queens and protecting the e7 pawn like I was thinking before. Although, if we have to play rook e8, then knight b5 could be a question. Okay. So they attack the queen, but I don't think that's what I would call a useful move. It retreats their bishop, it blocks the e-file. So while I do have to move my queen as opposed to playing something like knight h5, I think I am very happy to just trade queens and get on with the game. They could take with the h-pawn, try to open the h-file, but I don't think that would get them a lot, so I would think just bishop takes. Okay. And then I just need to finish developing. I'm still up that pawn. I am considering a6, just to rule out anything coming to b5, but I think if I'm developing my light square bishop, then I don't need to spend time on that. Because I could always play something like rook c8, so I'm leaning bishop e6. We don't normally block center pawns with bishops, but that's because it might hamper the other bishop's development, but that's not a problem when we choose a fianchetto. It would slow down my center pawns, but I don't really think those are pushing fast anyways. White does have quite a bit of pressure towards the center, so I think a simple bishop e6. We could throw in bishop g4, I guess, but I think I like this piece on e6, and that might help them trade this not very good bishop. Which, if it wants to improve, probably just comes back to d3. Or I guess f3 is an option. But I'm okay with rook b8 there, and then maybe we do play a6 anyways. At least if they play knight b5, then we're flexible to do that. And it's hard for them to get through this d6 pawn. So I can still look for opportunities to exchange pieces. That could be knight g4, which attacks f2, encourages them to trade off one of their bishops, and maybe that knight pivots d5. Maybe there's a chance we play bishop takes c3. I think that could be a way to open up a couple of pieces. I probably lean towards developing the rook first, though, just to get away from anything with this bishop f3, even if I play b6 instead of a6. Time is coming back to equal. I don't think we're doing too bad. We have a good position in 2 minutes, which I should be comfortable with. They do go for that. Okay, attacks b7. I think the only good way to deal with that looks like rook b8. But I was thinking I was okay with that. And now potentially bishop g4 really forces a bishop trade, but again, I'm still not sure that's brilliant, because this bishop does a really good job blocking the e-file against anything with rook e1. I guess this way, there is a possibility of playing knight takes d6. I don't know if that's what they were thinking. I would end up with 2 pieces for a rook and a pawn, which is still better, but not something I was intending to allow. But they're attacking a7. So I kind of have to respond to that, don't I? Yeah, I probably could have been a little more accurate here. Do I have any way of dealing with both of those moves? I'm not entirely sure it's what they're planning, but there's a good chance. Can't put a piece on d5 or d8, they just take a7. Can I trap the knight? Maybe? Do I like that better? Like rook d8, take on a7, bishop d7. I think there's always probably like bishop e3. So no, I think we'll allow that. And we'll play one of these pieces versus rook endgames. Which again, I do still think is better for black, but I would guess my advantage probably peaked a couple of moves ago. Okay, so they do go for that. I think we'll take that. Nothing in between. Bishop takes. Then I'll move this rook to make sure I get a second rook on b8 to protect that pawn on b7. So I don't think it super matters where we go, but let's say we do this. Okay, so they don't have an invasion with their rook. Again, d7 is extremely well covered. This bishop still looks great on e6. We just traded off those center pawns. I might like to play h5, really try to clamp down the king side. Yeah, they have to activate their rook somehow. They could play like rook d6, rook to b6 would probably be a smart idea. I don't know if it's the kind of thing they're likely to come up with. But with that in mind, I might like bishop f8, just to really guard every possible entry square. Because that could be kind of irritating to deal with. I definitely do not want to play something with bishop c8. He says he should have taken on b7. Not entirely sure where he meant that. But it's not my job to think about that right now. Instead of bishop takes rook. I'm not inclined to say that worked, but we'll maybe check that later. So yeah, if they play rook d6, I don't really want to play knight d7 as the thing. So if they double, they're threatening to take the two pieces back, and then I would just be down a pawn. So that's why I say that's uncomfortable to deal with. This bishop is really strong. I guess it'd be okay if they played rook b6. I could put something on d5 once that rook is moved. So even rook d6, bishop f8, rook moves, something to d5. As long as their other rook can't come in and interfere. But I think knight d5 attacks the rook again, and if they take it, then I would have two awesome bishops. Okay, so I think they want to double and play rook d8. So let's start by covering d6 right away, and if they double, maybe bishop e7 will cover that square. Then I can get the king off the back rank, maybe play b6 or b5, and start pushing forward as we do end up with a time advantage now. Okay, so that leads me towards g5, or g4 and g5. So I can always play h5. I don't think there's a drawback there. Again, taking full control of the king side, really squishing any hopes of g4, which keeps these pawns a little weaker. It's the perfect master pawn chain from f7, g6, h5. I think I'd still play bishop e7, and now I'm just asking, what are their doubled rooks doing? They both look very silly. So king or bishop first doesn't really matter. Could play bishop c5, just make them move that rook again. Suggests I want to take on f2. And if they go back, yeah, I can't quite take advantage of that. Could play, actually, knight g4, because I'd rather have two bishops than a bishop and a knight. And I'm not giving them any entry squares if I do that, so let's do this. Really ask them to take my knight. Good, that bishop can always come back to e6, and that, do I play bishop e3? Takes rook d8, rook d1. I don't think I like that endgame. I think we have to keep the bishops for now, leave that as a threat, which they probably noticed now that I slowed down for a few seconds, but I don't think that was going to be favorable for me yet. So they do move. We can step up with the king. If they double, I will. Do I care? No, I don't really care if we trade rooks. I think I'd be fine with that. So let's start by stopping b4. And these bishops are just so good now. I can even actually play a4. That really is going to be nasty. I can probably plant this bishop right on b3. Keeps their king stuck in a box. They can never get rid of it. If you want to imagine bishop and then b6, that could be very nice. I guess we can do this. They could play rook d8 anyways. I don't think I need to stop that. I'm just wondering if I have any better moves. I could play bishop f5, actually. Really push their king into the corner. I'm waiting for them to move this rook so I can play bishop f2 and win one of the pawns straight away. So I'm kind of trying to bait them into that. That's fine. This bishop is protected. I can still play bishop f2, I think. I'm being a little lazy about protecting the kingside pawns, but I figure there's mostly bishop c2 if I need it. Or something like that. 2 bishops are unprotected, but that's okay. And also b6 puts that pawn on a protected square. Exactly, so something like that, or actually the rook is hanging. Let's not forget about that. But if it wasn't, then I think b6 would have been perfectly fine. So, alright. Not a bad little game. Alright, so opening-wise, I will jump straight up to here, which we know is what we were supposed to play. Queen h4 is not a very common move by white. We do normally expect queen c3, where we have the option of knight d5, I think is the objective best, but e6 has spectacular results because they do quite often take the knight. As you can see, 72%, and believe it or not, this continues even when you eliminate every bullet game and even quite a few low-rated games. It still holds up that they play a3 some of the time, but they do fall for that quite often. But we got queen h4 instead, so I don't think I need to check our repertoire. I don't think that's going to be there. And then I guess I can look through this quickly without turning on the full engine, but it looks like our tactic should have been working. I definitely didn't think bishop f4 was great. I thought they should be activating this rook at some point, which they never really accomplished. Queen g4 might have been a little over eager to trade queens. That's okay. I guess to my point, yeah, our advantage slipped a little bit as we were coming through here. But not supposed to be because of knight b5, rather bishop b3 might give them some kind of play with their 2 bishops. But yeah, I guess we will come back to this a little later and figure out exactly how we're supposed to handle that. Was this the only inaccuracy? Yeah, it was. Still no perfect games, because we tried to trade queens up a pawn. But okay. Trading still very good for black. Even with this, I wasn't that worried because, as we have talked about in at least 1 or 2 of the games in this series before, even at this point here, 2 pieces versus a rook and a pawn is, as a rule, much better for the side with 2 pieces. Like, the rook needs either a second pawn or some other kind of advantage. I don't think there is a realistic flaw in the black position, which, of course, is easy to say with the evaluation here, but what are their rooks supposed to do? Like I said, the only thing we can look at in a moment is if they play rook d6. But I believe I was ready with bishop f8 there. Let them move, and then I thought knight d5. So we'll come check on that a little later, because that interferes with this bishop and covers this pawn. Is there anything else really to add after that? It doesn't really look like it here. I thought I was pretty happy with that game, aside from somewhere in here, whether we want to pick this queen g4 moment or if there was something else, because queen a5 doesn't really feel right to me. Like, if they're trying to attack, I guess we're just saying maybe we want to play knight h5, so we get the queen out of the way for that, and if they have to move their queen again, like, we're happy to see that. Queen g5, I have to figure we're probably okay to take that, but I can see computer suggests at a lower depth at least e5. Okay, we'll come back to that in a sec. They played queen h4, and yes, our trick works. Knight takes e5. In fact, we kind of rely on it. Otherwise, this would be a lot worse, because this knight might not have a good place to go. Especially if you think like knight d5, bishop c4, keeps chasing the knight, gets this piece into a good attacking position, gets uncomfortable for black quickly. So you'll definitely want to remember that we do have these tricks with knight takes e5, which partly explains why white plays queen c3, is they want to keep that covered. But they missed that, so we do get to grab that pawn. Here, I was wondering about knight d5 a little, but it felt... no, they don't have bishop d4, I acknowledge that. So what exactly is less good about this? Queen d4, and the pieces get quite loose, because there's going to be this rook in the corner. So queen d4, and we have a queen and a knight both hanging, so we have to take that, but then after bishop takes, there's a rook hanging and a knight hanging. So we'd have to give up material like this, and we'd be down in exchange for a pawn. Rook 4, knight, and a pawn. So we cannot, in fact, play knight d5 there, so I am glad that I just chose a developing move. Castles, castles is all good. Bishop d3, not a great square. If we're trying to include that bishop in an attack as white, I don't think pointing at g6 is going to be the best place most of the time. Not that there's a huge difference, but I would figure bishop c4 is usually better. We just want to keep developing, just good, simple moves. I try to emphasize that as much as I can. And I think it was here or was it on the next move? It might have been here where I thought they should have played rook e1. I spoke about that somewhere. Let me double check that. Bishop f4. No, it was here, I think. This is where I was really thinking, where I thought this made more sense to play. But I can, okay, I was thinking knight h5. I'll look into that again in a second, but just here. Why bishop f4 is, here, sorry, bishop f4 is an inaccuracy. Well, that's very superficial, attacking the queen, I can say that for sure. It should be clear that I've already been thinking about moving the queen out of the center, so I definitely don't mind the excuse to play queen h5 or queen a5, if that is a preference of the computer. Either way, I mean, I'm seeing some bishop e6s. That bishop really does sit well on the square to block the e-file. Like if you say, rook e1, how do we protect this pawn? Well, why not block with the bishop? And it's very hard for white to get through that. This is quite a solid construction with the two bishops set up like this. Queen h5, okay, fine. Didn't love it, but whatever. I would have been very happy to do this and just be up a pawn in an endgame. I would fully trust myself to win a position like that. If we do something like this, rook e1, e6, yeah, I mean, I can play d5. This bishop will struggle for a little bit, but black really doesn't have any weaknesses, so I think I can afford to take some time to figure that out. Queen g3, queen g4. We already touched on queen f5. Looks like it threatens knight h5, which would be a helpful exchange to get rid of the dark square bishop. I've already sort of explained why I don't think the light square bishop is very impactful, but the dark square bishop could be a little more attractive to capture. But we really did just push for this. And they played knight h1. I was looking at knight takes, which forces them to play queen takes, because otherwise we would take the bishop. And then, as I had described, we attack the bishop, we attack the rook. And if we play f3, I think we're pretty happy to go through this and take here. And then, yeah, I don't think I was anticipating bishop e5, but that does make a ton of sense here. If not, then I guess we can protect the pawn, but we can't use this rook, I think, because of knight d5. It's kind of a fork on the pawn and on c7. But bishop e5 is great, because when they're two squares away on a diagonal like this, it is going to take a very long time for white to remove that bishop from the square, and that gives black a lot of time to solidify however we want to, like just improve rooks, improve the king. Like, it's just an extremely good position for black. Bishop e2, we're happy to make that trade, and we do get to sit our bishop on g4. I am noticing that knight g4 move does flicker up, if I'd wanted to consider that a little more closely. But it worked out okay. They played bishop e3, a6 or b6. I might have played b6, just because a6, we're wary of giving a square like b6 to this bishop. We're doing a less good job controlling some of those important squares. I don't know if that really comes into play. I don't think bishop a7 feels like a problem if we attack it. Bishop moves. They can't take this pawn, but I guess they're kind of messing with us that we still have to figure out a way to protect that pawn. We can't just move our rook back and forth. So that could have been a little more irritating, I guess. Knight b5, maybe they got attracted to this idea, but it just doesn't really work out for them. This is where they spent their big chunk of time, over a minute. And then quick to knight b5. So I would guess they were working this out. I think rook b8 was a pretty obvious move to consider. But just in terms of evaluation, it's just not a great choice for black. And yeah, this I think is in the chat where they had said they should play bishop takes b7, but I don't know, this rook isn't hanging, and there's no discoveries with this bishop, so I really didn't think that was going to work. Like, if you had a check, maybe, sure, but they don't, so I don't know what they were thinking, but that was not going to be correct either. I don't think there's anywhere else that comes into play. Like, there was never a time they could have taken on b7 where I'm just taking a piece back. Okay, so we get that, and then we get our two pieces versus rook and pawn. A while ago, I had been anticipating something with h5, but I guess I can pause to look at this. I was ready to play bishop f8, control as many squares as I can, and yeah, I guess I could play bishop c5 as well. Maybe we trade b7 for f2 or something, but would have played knight d5. They have to move the rook, I think, because if they do this, it would end up very similar to the game, where these two bishops are just totally dominant. I can sit it on c6 if I want, just so it can't be attacked, but black has no opponent for those bishops. So white is going to be in a lot of trouble. Rook h4, again, just control that square. If they had doubled, wasn't sure about bishop c5 here. I think I would have just played bishop e7. Just not let them trade rooks right away, because I still need to make sure this pawn isn't too weak. Right now it kind of needs the rook to protect it, so I wasn't ready to trade rooks just yet. But that, again, covers all of these squares. So even though they have 2 rooks, they're doubled on an open file, there's nothing for them to actually do on that file. So I was perfectly happy with that. h5, as we said, locks things down. If I play bishop e7, I don't think they want to play g4 right away. Like, maybe they could, but they're probably nervous to have their rook being watched by my bishop. But it's also just effective to completely control that. I have too many things attacking g4 now, so there's no way they're ever going to push that pawn through. So rook moves, we can chase it around a bit. We got to this point. I was wondering about bishop e3, but I did not think it was going to work. I felt like the trades would just be equal pawns in a rook endgame, so I'm glad to see that appears to be correct. So they can take this bishop, and I was wondering if you could use this trick, like we don't take it right away, we just attack it a second time, but they do have the option to protect it a second time. And then we just don't have a way to come through this where we're actually up material. Even a king and pawn endgame, I think I'm kind of nervous about, because these pawns do concern me that they could make a passed pawn fairly quickly. And white's way out of this, by the way, is you push the c pawn, and then you play king c2. And once you get to this point, black is really forced into making the capture, because otherwise you're just down in exchange. And then with or without a rook trade, you end up in some equal endgame like this. And I definitely didn't think I had any chance of realistically winning that. So we can just move the bishop. There's no reason to go into that. We're still happy with 2 bishops versus rook and pawn. I mean, really, for emphasis, materially, like, if you've learned the point system of bishops being worth 3 points, material is equal, but black is -4. There's no checkmating attack. Like, you really need to appreciate how good 2 pieces are versus a rook and a pawn. So king b1, we just slowly improve. White allowed me to really clamp on this pawn structure on the queen side. Thought about bishop e3, but did enjoy pushing their king into the corner. Of course, they can't come back, because then we really do get to play bishop e3. And then we just keep slowly trying to improve. It's basic endgame stuff. Try to attack the pawns where we can. The king side is pretty weak. I mean, even here, I said I was waiting for them to move this rook so I could play bishop f2, but I don't really see an improvement. Like, it's -5. It's not up to me to say where the good moves for white are. So attack pawns, win a pawn, and even if they save the rook, their king is in a box. They're going to have trouble with that. Let's say maybe rook f1. We can activate the rook this way. They try to attack this pawn. I said I was always playing b6. If they attack this pawn, I guess we could play bishop d7 if we really wanted to. But we could also just ignore that and start pushing our kingside pawns and probably try to make a passed pawn on this side. So of course, even if we trade off all the pawns, all the rooks, 2 bishops is a checkmateable position. So there is that too at the very tail end of things. But rook b5 blunders a rook and gives us a quick finish. So as far as takeaways for this game, I think it's a pretty direct one out of the opening, is when they play this early queen takes d4. They're supposed to play e5, but when they do, they definitely have to watch out for this trick with knight takes e5 and queen a5 check. I think it was actually a beta tester who suggested I make sure to include that in the course. So very memorable. Of course, it helped us here. Thank you for watching today's Sicilian game, and I will see you for another one soon.